Welcome to the special board meeting of the St. Peter's School Board, Wednesday, November 4th, 2020. This is a live stream, as you can see. We are not in the governor's room at the community center. I would entertain a motion to call the meeting to order, or I'll just call the meeting to order, and then consider a motion to adopt the agenda.
I so move to adopt the agenda. This is Lokenskard.
Thank you, Tim. Do we have a second?
Hager, second.
Thank you. Now we'll do a roll call, as is customary when we're doing virtual meetings. Vicky?
Hager, here.
Bill?
Aye.
Thank you, Tim.
Lokenskard, aye.
Tracy?
Stewie, aye.
Leonard, aye. Motion carries.
I think Drew's here.
Excellent. Drew, do you want to weigh in on that vote?
It's an aye.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Consider request to speak to the agenda. It's a little hard with the live stream and the meeting going on. If there is a question that needs immediate answering, the best thing to do, immediate or otherwise, I think, is to email our COVID information email. That'll go to the right people, and our administrators, superintendent can respond as quickly as possible to those questions that you have tonight. So that email again is COVID. Probably don't have to spell that for people, but I will. COVID dash information at stpeterschools.org. That email again is COVID-19 information at stpeterschools.org. That's also found on our website as well, and I encourage people to use that as a way to ask questions. We have just really one main action item tonight, and that is to review our current COVID data and consider future change in learning models. So with that, Superintendent Gronseth, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Chair Leonard. And I'm going to share a presentation. There we go. Is it up?
Yep.
And if just a tip, if you want it to be larger, you can click on that and pin that screen, and then it will be bigger, although you won't be able to see all of the people on the screen. So tonight we really want to take a deep dive into the data relating to COVID, kind of go through some of the steps that we've gone through since really last spring. And we do have our administrative team here. We have Rachel Fitch, school nurse here, and we are happy to have Jody Fishnick from Nicollet County joining us as well. And so everyone will be chiming in throughout the presentation on different pieces. So I really want to review how we got where we are right now. We developed plans. There were some last spring. We worked all through the summer. And then in August, we presented our reopening plan to the school board in early August, August 4th, actually, and the board adopted that. And then through a motion of the school board at the regular August meeting, we decided to start the school year in a hybrid model, K-12. And we really talked about leaning into caution and consistency, that we wanted to hold the safety of our students and our staff forefront in all that we were doing, and to hold engaging learning for our students. And throughout this time, we've been monitoring the health of the community by looking at numbers, following our own numbers, and have shared weekly updates with the school board and with the community through emails and phone calls And then we've also revisited that at our regular school board meetings. And this has really served us well when we've been in the hybrid learning model with smaller class sizes, reduced number of students on our buses, social distancing while we're in school. We've been able to maintain that 6-foot distance for the most part, and then having all the protocols in place of hand washing and regular cleaning of those high touch surfaces like door handles and railings and computers and everything else that we've been doing, and having defined routes in our buildings. I'm sure you've seen the arrows on the floor and the lines on the floor to make sure that we're avoiding contact with others. And then our regular cleaning routines and disinfecting, and closely monitoring all of those cases and the quarantine. And that, because of that, we've been able to avoid close contacts for the most part during the school day. We have had now, this says 1, now we've had 2 as of today, close contacts during the school day. One of them was because of a furniture arrangement. As you know, students and desks, sometimes those desks scoot around a bit, and a few of the desks ended up closer than we would hope for, and that ended up in a close contact. But we have since corrected that, and we'll be checking on our classroom furniture arrangements a little more often. So we also have done some summaries over the past, I guess, 2 weeks ago now, and we have some summaries, and I'm going to have the principals share those summaries with you. I know there wasn't one done in early childhood because they've been able to have all their students in smaller class sizes, so they weren't asking their parents how hybrid learning was going. So we'll start with South. So Doreen.
All right. Well, we had about 148 responses. So if you consider the fact that we have around 300 students at South, when we break that down, 53% of the people who responded were kindergarten parents, 43% were first grade parents, and 4% of them have students in both kindergarten and first grade. And what we really wanted to know was, when you look at the year, how has it been? Has it been pretty much what you expected it to be? Has it been better? Or has it been worse than what you anticipated? And as you can see on the graph, we were able to have about 83%, with 58% saying it was as they expected, and 25% of our parents saying it was actually better than what they expected it to be. Another area that we looked at was communication. We wanted to make sure there's that fine line of how much is too much, and where should that information be coming from, and where would you like more from? And as you can see, 81% felt like the district level communication was just right, 74% at the building level. And I do have to say that 78% felt like the communication from the teacher was at a just right level. And that's one of those areas where I looked, and we definitely are going to be increasing the amount of information that we send out from South. Trying to do an every week, just a little gathering of information, like this is kind of what's going on specifically for South. So that's something that we've already, in the time from when the surveys came in until now, we have already put that into place. The next slide should have where we asked about the workload. Again, we've never done this before, and trying to figure out what is the plan to do? How much is too much when these students are working at home? And when we asked about the workload, we had 76% respond that they felt like the workload was just right. 7% felt we were sending too much, and 18% felt that we did not send enough. We also needed to know if what we were giving was at the correct rigor. And the numbers are pretty aligned with the just rates. So 77% of our parents said they felt it was just right. 1% felt that the rigor was too much, and 22% felt it was not enough. So I met with my building leadership team. We also had comments, and just to share a little bit some of the things that are going well, we asked them, and they were very, very complimentary of the staff and of the fact that we have put safety protocols in place. So those were two of our comments of things that are going well. Things that they did not feel were working well. Of course, the number one comment was that they just feel like their children need more time in school, and I don't think there's any of us that would disagree with the fact that this is a little less than ideal. And the other comments that they did not feel were going well was in the beginning we experienced some technology issues, and I do believe that through some of our instructional pieces that we've put in place, invited people in and reached out to people to help resolve those. Hotspots were an issue at the beginning. I feel like some of those pieces have been addressed, but we will continue to reach out to people that let us know that they're having any difficulty with technology.
Thank you, Doreen. And North.
Yep. Good evening, everybody. I think it's important to point out, as Doreen just finished up, the survey results from South is across kindergarten through fourth grade, we have pretty much the same structure set up for learning. Just keeping in mind that we have certain people that are designated as distant learning teachers, roughly 2 specific teachers at each grade level. That provide distance-only instruction at certain days, and then the rest of the teachers at those grade levels have a mix of students in class on both A and B days. So you find a lot of patterns across both of our buildings. So just looking at the data overall at North, we have approximately 470 students this year at North, and we have just short of 300 respondents to our survey. And that's broken down basically by thirds. There were about 100 respondents per grade level, so very evenly distributed all the way across. So overall outlook, you know, about 83% or 83.2% of the parent respondents said with hybrid and distant learning models, either met what they were thinking it was going to be or exceeds it. And when you look at some of the specific comments in that area, parents talked about how I found the pattern that parents shared that it certainly had a different feel from last spring. And so some of the conversations that I've had with parents around that topic, we described last spring's instruction as kind of like a emergency response to instruction, where the training and professional development over the summer has really helped people feel better about a blended approach to learning rather than just kind of getting information out and having students kind of practice on their own. It's more responsive. So you could definitely see in the results in the feedback form that parents could tell it's a different kind of instruction that's taking place this fall. Also, as far as communication goes, very similar to South. Parents and guardians felt like it was just pretty much right about a communication at the district level. As compared to the classroom and the building level, they were at about 81.8%. So not a ton off, but I have had some conversations with parents about how do we get that right fit feel from the teacher, from the building, and in the district level. I don't think the district should take a different approach to communication right now. That's really solid numbers. But I think what I felt in the conversations or the comments from parents was, you know, keep working on just that alignment of communication expectation and not too much. And some of the parents mentioned, since we use Seesaw for our virtual learning environment, there's a good contingency of them that really like that one-stop shop as far as using the family Seesaw app in order to see those announcements, as compared to Blackboard Connect messages or direct email messages or text messages. There's still multi-avenues to get information out to parents, and we always strive to try to use whatever method works and connects with the majority of people. But of course, people have preferences on how to get information as well. So just keeping the fingers on the pulse of that, just trying to find the right avenue and the right amount. As far as workload, and that's just the amount of work that kids get, They're saying, the majority is saying just right, just short of 30% saying not quite enough. So just a little bit more work, but that's a fine line too. I mean, it pretty much parallels what the rigor level responses were. But I know when you look at the results, there certainly was a strong feel in the comments that, please don't give my son or daughter like just busy work either. Right. So it's just being really, really mindful of like, yes, I want the work to be at their level and challenging in the right amount, but don't just give them busy work either. So really we can drill down to the grade levels and try to pinpoint the teams at second, third, and fourth grade to try to figure out, especially during conference time coming up, and get a real feel for each individual family, how that workload and that rigor levels are at. And matching what Mrs. Elke said in other comments, there definitely was a pattern on kind of two different ways. There was a lot of people saying like, wow, like this is turning out way better than I thought it would. My son or daughter is learning way better than I thought they would in this model. But then on the other side, there were people like, well, my son or daughter this is challenging. It's challenging to balance all of this. I'd love to have the kids in full time. Yeah, we see a pattern with all of that. And I just want to make it clear with everybody, we certainly want the kids in full time too. That wasn't a question in my mind. We want the kids here. We know that's easier to manage learning. But obviously, we're trying to do it the safest way possible for everybody. So I do want to thank parents for, 300 responses. That was great.
Thank you, Darren.
Mm-hmm.
And now to the middle school.
Right, at the middle school, our students are a little bit older, so we were also able to give a student survey. We had a student survey with 546 respondents. That's about 80% of our kids, and that was pretty equally distributed amongst all grades 5 through 8. And then we had 260 parents respond. We've broken down the results into kind of an overall outlook, communication, workload, and rigor. The overall outlook, I was pretty pleased with these results. Students have a positive outlook on the year. 89.6% of students said that the year so far has met or exceeded their expectations, as compared to 82.1% of parents. In communication, 86.5% of parents responded that we had just right amount of communication at the district level, as compared to 78% just right at the building level. So it's really got us thinking about what we're communicating, how we're communicating it, and when we communicate it at the building level. 88.6% of students reported that they knew what to expect from teachers. And that question was really designed to see how is our communication from teachers to students in terms of those expectations on what they're supposed to be doing each day. For the workload section, 80% of parents and 73% of students reported just right amount on in-person days. So those numbers are relatively high as compared to 55% of parents and guardians reporting just right on the distance learning days. And with that data, parents tended to skew more toward the not enough work. 15.9% said, 28.7% said not enough as compared to 15.9% too much. And not surprisingly, students were kind of in the opposite direction. Students, 61.5% said just right, but they skew toward too much work. So there's a little bit of disagreement there between parents and students. Parents tend to think not enough work on distance days, and students tend to think, hey, way too much, back off. So it's really got us thinking as a building, the amount of work that is out there and what is appropriate. And then kind of on the same level, but a different category, if you will, is rigor. So rigor and workload, two different things. Workload is how much time does it take me to do my work, and rigor is the level of thinking that goes into it. And about 80% of students and parents reported just right on in-person days. We feel really good about what we're able to deliver on those in-person days in terms of the just right level. 61% of students reported just right on distance learning days, and those skewed once again toward too much rigor on those distance learning days, where parents once again skewed toward not enough rigor. So still working toward finding that balance of of just right level on those distance learning days.
Thank you. And Principal Engeldinger.
I would echo most of what my colleagues said about our results. And again, at the high school, we were able to also survey our students. So we had 185 respondents from our kids, 309 from parents. So thanks to everybody who took the time to take these. Parents and students were pretty equal at 89% and 85%. And their overall impression of our current model either meets or exceeds their expectations. So I was pleased with that. They know what to expect for the most part from their teachers and their classes. Where the parents and the students differed, again, I would concur with Mr. Graff in the workload. They were they were almost exactly opposite, and the amount of parents who said they thought the workload was maybe not quite enough to too much from the kids. One of the comment questions that we asked both was, what's something that's not working? Perhaps the best response that I got from that was my son. But other than that, it was kind of the same comments about and about equal, those who think that would, obviously we'd all love our kids to be there every single school day, from those who really felt that kids should be there more, to those who were starting to get nervous and wanted to stay the course. Let's see. The communication question at the high school was an interesting one there were a few comments on it, because at the high school, depending on your kids' activities or interests or courses, it comes from a lot of different areas, whether that's the counseling office, the principal's office, or the activities office, or individual teachers. So that was kind of all over the board, but mostly said communication was just about right from the district, and about 80% said it was just about right from the building. And I think that, again, there were about equal amounts of too much and not enough workload and rigor at the high school as well. I also, another good, some good comments from the kids. Kids are always dead on in their in their comments, and so they gave some really good feedback on what was working, and they took most of them took the survey really seriously, so I appreciated that. To the rigor question, it was interesting. I had a couple of comments from kids saying they didn't know what that meant. So from that, I take it we need to up the rigor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Before we move on from surveys, were there any questions about the surveys?
This is Tracy. Not really questions so much as, that observation with the workload being, we have some people who are in the middle, but, we have, people on both sides if it's too much or not enough. And I think that just goes to say, as we all know, the individual of those kids, because there's some kids that are going to breeze through it and some kids aren't. And so the other thing I think is people think that you should have like 6 hours of work because you're at school for 6 hours, but you're at school for 6 hours. But if you cut out the fluff of standing in line and going to lunch and doing all that, it's a lot less. So I don't know, what is the ideal amount of time that kids should be spending on work at home? So I think that's kind of interesting, but it's not a question, it's a statement.
Right. I think that's a really good point, Tracy, because there are so many transitions during the school day, and that doesn't equate. 7 hours of at school doesn't equate to 7 hours of instruction and practice and learning and things. So it's a really good point.
And if I can comment also, Tracy, excellent point. It really speaks to our need to continue to look for ways to differentiate. It's so much easier to do that in person, and how do we get smart about doing that on our distance days? So very good point.
Yeah, because there might be some kids that could sit down and do 4 hours of work, but it would be like pouring hot wax on the Stewie kids if we wanted them to sit down and do that for 4 hours straight. You know what I mean? It's just love our kids, but everybody's just kind of different what they can handle. So.
Okay. So Minnesota Department of Education and Minnesota Department of Health have been really valuable partners through all of this. And I've said it many times before, we are educators, we are not medical professionals. And so we really look to guidance from others when it comes to all things COVID. And we have weekly conference calls. Actually, we have every other week with the county. And Rachel, our school nurse, has weekly calls with the Department of Health. And I invite other administrators to join me when they're available, have weekly calls with the Department of Education. And that is a lot of things to do with all of the requirements and recommendations and the financial pieces and all of the different areas that we have to consider. And there have been many, many, many changes and updates as we learn more about COVID-19 and as we learn more about the challenges that we face as educators in an environment of COVID-19. And I understand that we have another conference call, a special one with the governor coming up on Friday, where we are going to learn about perhaps another wave of changes for us to look forward to. And then state and federal actions in response to COVID-19 also affect the requirements. Along with that funding come more requirements too. So we always have to be mindful of those. And in a recent letter dated October 27th, and I don't expect you to read this, it's just kind of summary pieces. We got a long letter from the Deputy Commissioner, Heather Mueller, who really takes the lead on many of our COVID calls and many of our communications. And it was really kind of restating that some of the pieces the state has been looking at and how we go from one model to another. And they talked about that chart of 0 to 10 and 10 to 20 and 20 to 30 and then 30 to 50, and how their intent was that was really about setting our initial learning model, and that from that we take what they're calling a scalpel approach, which they mean they really want to dig into the data, not only look at your county data, but look at how is it being spread, where is it being spread, how many cases do you have in school, how many do you have in quarantine, are you seeing transmission in your own community, and how is it being spread and how quickly. And so that's really what got us going on this deep data dive, along with a call that we had from MDH and the county about it might be time for us to take a really close look at our data, and we'll see why and as we progress here. I did want to point out though that yet again the Commissioner's Office, MDE, wanted to point out that if we are in distance learning, and that's that fourth bullet point, that if we are in distance learning because of our numbers, you cannot participate in activities in athletics. And they have been restating that several times over the past couple of weeks, and are getting a bit more directive with that. And then they wrap it up by saying a little reminder that you need to follow all of our guidance and our requirements, or we will step in and do that ourselves. So it's just a friendly reminder to follow the state guidance. That's how I took it anyway. So there were some specific areas indicated for a data review. One would be the county rates, so we'll go over those. And then school rates of positive cases and quarantines, how many close contacts are happening, our staffing capacities, how many teachers are we missing, and are we able to cover those absences, and then just anything else that is pertinent. So the first area I want to look at, and Jody, you can feel free to dive in anytime that you want. So, and then she disappeared. That's funny. Not really.
She was probably trying to she maybe hit the
Yeah.
wrong button. That's what I think.
So, well, if she comes back, she can jump in. So looking at the county COVID-19 data, there are two numbers that we talk about and two numbers that I communicate in our weekly messages. One is the official number, and that official number is actually 2 weeks behind where we currently are. That's so they can scrub the data. They can take out any cases that maybe were from another county, and they can also add cases if there's a backlog, which I believe there currently is. Oh, welcome back, Jody. I was just saying, feel free to jump in whenever you have information to add, or if I say something wrong. So if they have a backlog like they do right now, they sometimes need that extra time to be able to put those cases in the right time slot. It's not that those people aren't being notified, it's that they're not being entered into the system, and so they're not officially counted. So the latest official numbers are for the week October 4th to October 17th. Of course, that will change tomorrow when we get new numbers. So our official numbers for Nicollet County, 24.57, LeSueur County, 33.23. We look at both counties because we do serve both counties, although about 1,800 of our students are from Nicollet County. So the majority of our students are from Nicollet, which means about 400 to 500 are from LeSueur County. So it's still a significant number of students in LeSueur. So our current but unofficial numbers, this is a number that I got from Cassie Sassenberg from Nicollet County just today. The period from 10/16 to 10/30, the number jumps to 48.25. And then LeSueur County, the latest number I had for them was through November 3rd. They're at 47.4. So you can see that that is quite a jump between 2 weeks ago and today. And today, Minnesota across the state had the highest number of cases recorded yet to date. So it's increasing rapidly, unfortunately. And then as I said, the counties have indicated that it's being spread at social gatherings, not necessarily large social gatherings, but just social gatherings, getting together with people, getting together with friends, going out to eat, having people over, sometimes those conversations at the end of the driveway, athletic practices and athletic events. And I want to say that it's not necessarily the players while they're playing, but it's what's happening all around those events. It's the people cheering in the stands and hugging after a win or hugging after a goal, or just really all of those activities that go around it. The transportation, we're putting them all on a bus and sending them off. So all of those times are of concern. And then we are seeing some cases in long-term care facilities. And we'll kind of dig into this data further to really understand where are these cases and how are they being spread.
Bill?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just,
No.
and I don't want to speak for you or public health, but I was digging around on the numbers a little bit too. And, part of that scalpel approach, I think, is looking at neighboring counties, is looking at the state. What direction are people going in? Are we an outlier? We are kind of an outlier in that we're on the low end right now. I was looking at numbers that varied slightly. So this based on the new numbers may be a little bit different. But 64 counties out of 87 have higher rates than us. The counties around us have similar rates. Redwood County, I think, if the numbers still hold true, has significantly higher rates than us. So it's not as if we are the only county that has a weird number because it's concentrated in a healthcare facility or at a college. This is really becoming a widespread statewide issue. I heard something today that we're at like 98% capacity for ICU beds in the state. So these numbers are widespread and concerning. And the other thing I would add, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this too. We're talking about actual cases with these numbers, but for every case, how many close contacts are there that need to quarantine? So even best case scenario, those people don't get sick. We're talking about, I'm guessing, double, triple, quadruple this number that is forced to quarantine and taken out of the classroom, kids and teachers and paras and custodians, and so the effect to the school isn't just the number of cases and where those cases come from. It's the people that are close to them and all of that. So it gets to be a really big number.
This is Tracy Stewie. I just have a question. I would like to clarify. So when we say that the Nicollet County numbers are 24.57, that really truly is just a number. Those aren't the number of people in Nicollet County. That's just like the number that comes out of the magical equation. Is that correct?
So the number of cases then is about 3 times that.
Okay, that was my question. Okay.
So there's about 33,000 people in Nicollet County. And so they take the number of cases and divide that by the number of people in the county divided by 10,000.
Okay.
So really, if you think about it as it's about 3 times, so really there'd be about 75 cases in the county.
And that's what I thought, but I think that that's just something that people need to remember. We don't just have 24 people in Nicollet County. We have much more than that, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Because that number can be confusing.
To clarify, Tracy, the case rate is the number of cases per 10,000 population. It's just a way of standardizing that number so we can compare it here and in other counties or other states, that type of thing. So in Nicollet County, we have a population of about 33,000. So last week we had 81 cases, which for much of this time this summer, our cases we were really slow to start off in Nicollet County, and we had a long-term care outbreak. And so our numbers stayed really, despite the long-term care outbreak, we were under 100 for a really long time. But then, pretty consistently, like from, probably the middle of June on, we've been in like the 30 to 40 range. And then last week we jumped up to 75 cases in a week, and now this week is 81. It's pretty regular for us to see, 10 cases or more in a day.
And that's 81 cases so far this week, right?
That's for that period. So that's not, that's for the period that would have ended on the 30th.
I understand that in Blue Earth, there was 53 cases today. But
I can tell you over the weekend, the 2 days, I believe we had about 40 cases on Saturday and Sunday.
And so, okay, and we're gonna get into where those numbers are coming from, correct?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
That's where I'm headed next. Great segue. And I did want to point out that about 40% of 40% of the current cases are in St. Peter, and we are about a third of the population of Nicollet County. So looking at Nicollet County cases over time, I think it kind of speaks for itself, where we are at an all-time high for our county, just like Jody was saying. In June, we started off pretty slow, and then we kind of had a couple of peaks, and now we're having the largest peak that we've seen to date. Did you want to add anything to that, Jody?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. Every week I was able to report, we have between 30 and 40 cases, because I also am on the command team for the Mankato area public schools. And so I give them a weekly report at our meeting, and we are very consistently able to say that.
Yeah. And then this is how those cases are spread between age groups. So this 0 to 10 is there's 7 cases of students who are 0 to 10, and then it's kind of evenly spread across the age groups, which, I think when we all started this conversation, we were saying we'd likely see that more skewed to older population, and that we wouldn't see it so much in our younger children, and that just isn't proving to be the case. And kind of me, non-medical me, logical me, is saying, our younger students are a lot closer to the parents on a regular basis because they're sitting on our lap, or we're reading bedtime stories, or we're combing their hair, or we're helping them brush their teeth, or we're doing all of those things that we do as parents with our young children, which puts us in a lot closer proximity to them for longer periods of time. I don't know, my teenagers didn't always like when I sat really close to them and read them bedtime stories. And so maybe that's why our teenagers aren't getting it from their parents so much. But we are seeing, and Jody could probably speak to this, that we are seeing families get it.
We are seeing a lot more cases moving through entire families. We hadn't seen that until the last maybe month or 2 months, and it's not unusual to see it just slowly move through the family. I think if you looked at this chart for a longer period of time, so this is just the 2 weeks for October, but if you looked at the overall graph of all our cases, you would see a lot more in the 21 to 30-year-old category. That would be like, probably 175 or 200 cases. I don't know the exact numbers right now, but that's where you'd see the biggest concentration. Like Bill said, we normally think of it as an older person's illness, and we did have some numbers on the end, but actually if you looked at the only numbers we've had in older people really have been tied to outbreaks at the different long-term care facilities. So it's really that group of 20 to 30. We saw a big bump in those cases over the summer. Kids going out, partying, going to the bars and restaurants once they reopened, that's really where we saw the bump. The 10 to 20-year-old category started corresponding with that, as did the 31 to 40. Now it's kind of all over the board. I think people are really seeing COVID fatigue. They're tired of this. It's not going away. We talk about how it's going away after Election Day, that type of thing. It's not changing. And people are just tired of it. So they want to do what they want to do. And I expect that'll be a lot worse for the holidays. Because, we've been cooped up at this point for the better part of 8 months, and people aren't going to want to do that much longer.
Jody, this is John Carlson.
Hi, John.
I don't think that anybody. I didn't have the impression that it was less contagious for 0 to 10 and 11 to 20. I just thought it was the symptoms had a tendency to be less severe or less dangerous in that age bracket. Would that be true?
I would have to look, John, at specifically how that was phrased, but when we went to the Safe School Plan, part of that was really contingent on, for the younger children, they were less likely to get it and less likely to spread it, if I remember correctly. So there was a piece there. Does anybody remember exactly what that was? That was a concern, but we are seeing plenty of cases in the 11 to 20-year-old category right now.
And I think you have access to this data through the county. Are they ending up as hospitalization or anything? Or
we're really not seeing that in the younger group. I would say once we kind of get into the above 50 is really more when we're seeing the hospitalizations.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Although there was just an article in the paper that a 13-year-old died in Missouri. And I know that more locally, and can't really say a lot about it, but I do know that there is one student in our region who's in the ICU. So, I mean, it's not unheard of that children get sick.
And I'm sure it probably gets worse when you have underlying conditions besides that.
Well,
It definitely gets worse.
sorry, Jody, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay. It definitely gets worse when you have underlying conditions.
Yeah, I just want to add too that, you know, when we're mostly, as we should be, focused on children normally at school, because that's what we're trained to do as educators, or you're trained to do. And the school board really focuses on teachers, but we have a lot of adults in the building, and students have families. And so, you know, we don't want kids getting sick, but if adults are at equal or greater risk, we have to consider that as well.
And Jody, maybe I can have you explain this graph. You probably know more about it than I do.
Sure. You know, if we looked at overall, because if you stretch out the time period, just like with the last graphic, it's a little bit more informative than 2 weeks out. But we really are seeing a lot more community spread. We have people that tell us they don't know where they got it, which usually is a community spread then. We know they got it in the community, but they don't know where from. Again, basically the same thing. But what's really kind of unique more recently in the last maybe 2 months is we've been able to see where people get it from and watch it move. So it's more or less community spread. There is still some in congregate living. We do have an outbreak going on right now, but just the majority really is in the community. And when I talk about community, I want to caution, a lot of times people say, well, I went out grocery shopping or I went to Target, whatever. That's really not the kind of exposure we're looking for. We're looking at within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. Largely the kind of contact you're going to have just generally going out is going to be pretty minimal. You might brush by somebody. That's not something we're concerned about. You know, it's really more of the up close and personal for 15 minutes or longer.
And is this including the college students too?
This would include the college students, and we have seen a bump in college students. We didn't see one right away, but the last 2 weeks we've seen quite a bump in college students.
Okay.
And I suspect that after Halloween, both pretty much for most categories there, we're going to see a bump for that. You know, that's what today is a Wednesday. So we've had Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You know, probably by the weekend or early into next week, we'll start seeing a bump in cases for people that went out for Halloween and had Halloween parties. And I think we'll see that in the age categories. We'll probably see that in the school age categories, and we'll definitely see it in the college age categories.
Say, Jody, this is Bill Soderlund.
Hey, Bill.
From the time a person is exposed to the 15 minutes within the 6 foot space, when would you expect the symptoms to occur or the infection to take hold? How many days are you looking at?
We would say 5 to 7 would be pretty standard. So when we know somebody's been exposed, we put them on quarantine for 14 days. And the reason we go with 14 days is because it can take from 2 to 14 days for COVID to develop. It can go right up to that 14 days. That's why we don't want people to leave the house before that. But the sweet spot, the average is about 5 to 7 days. That's why when I count those numbers out real quick, it's like, what's 7 days out from Halloween? And that'll be early next week.
This is Tracy. And so just so I understand this too, because this is just confusing. So like say I was on quarantine for 14 days and I'm tootling along and everything is good. And then on day 13, I start to develop symptoms. Then when can that person actually then like go back to school or go back to work or go back out in the community? Does a new clock start then from when your symptoms start?
A new clock does start, Tracy.
Okay.
So if you were on quarantine and then you develop symptoms on day 13, I would encourage you to get tested. And then once you got tested and presumably diagnosed with COVID, your clock would start over again and would go restart 10 days. Because 10 days is what we know is the longest the infectious period lasts. That's why we go with 10 days for isolation, 14 days for quarantine. So 14 days to develop the symptoms. 10 days is because that's how long we know that you're infectious for. And it's been a learning process because COVID is a new virus. And so that's why, you know, the guidance kind of keeps changing a little bit, because at the longer period we have to do research on and really gather this information, then we can get better information and be more specific. So
Okay.
in your case, then you would we'd restart, would go back to the day of symptoms and then count out 10 days, because that would be when you'd be most infectious.
Thank you.
I should clarify too, because we have some kids in the school district in this situation. But if you have, say, let's say we've got a parent home, we've got mom home, and she's COVID positive. Okay, well, her kid has to stay home with her, and say that kid is, you know, maybe just in kindergarten. Her kid has to stay home with her because the kid is on quarantine for being a close contact. So what would happen is mom would serve out 10 days of isolation. Basically, the kiddo, assuming that they could not be separated from mom would still have to take care of them, interact with them. Some people can isolate, they can send the kids to live with relatives or that type of thing. But then that turns into, they do the 10 days of isolation with mom, and mom could go back to work, presumably. But then that kiddo starts 14 days of quarantine, because it's that last exposure to somebody while they're infectious. Then we restart the clock for the quarantine. So that means our kids could be looking at being out for 24 days.
And we have seen that for both staff and students. So we do use a variety of sources of information. This happens to be from this website that I've noted on the bottom. And over time, I've kind of compared their data with the data that we receive from the county and from the state, and it has proven to be pretty accurate. And I consider it an unofficial source, but it does show that rate over time, and where the arrow is, that is their prediction of where it would be going next. And that does fall in line with what I've heard from Jody and from Cassie and from the state epidemiologist. And I can't remember who was all in that meeting now, but there's quite a few people suggesting that our numbers are going to continue to increase, and that there was growing concern about the numbers and the period between Thanksgiving and our winter break. This is for Nicollet County. Whoops. Okay, sorry, I did hit it. So that was Nicollet County, and then Le Sueur County is predicted to go a little bit higher and a little bit faster, and they're predicted to be above the 50 mark within the week. So based on that, we did receive some recommendations from the county that they recommended that we consider going to a more restrictive model, including full-time K-12 distance learning beginning in mid to late November and running through until January. So that is their recommendation, and going through this data is what we're doing in response to that recommendation. We're looking at our data and digging into it. So when we look at our data in St. Peter schools, we track the number of cases and quarantines, and thank goodness for Rachel and all of her her multiple spreadsheets that all of this is tracked on, and keep us up to date on all of this. So I do want to say that there haven't, to this point, been any positive cases as a result of exposure during the school day. We have had many students who have been who have had close exposures, but those are happening primarily outside of the school day. We now have had 6 close exposures during the school day. One of those was a staff member and 5 were students. And so they had to go into quarantine because of that close contact. As I mentioned before, one of them was due to a furniture arrangement, which we have since corrected, and we'll stay on top of that. So at the elementary level, we currently have 2 staff members with positive cases and 4 that are in quarantine. And among elementary students, we have 2 positive cases and 11 in quarantine. For our middle school students, we have no staff with any cases and 1 that is currently in quarantine. High school, 2 positive cases, or for staff. And for students at middle and high school, there are 2 positive cases and 24 currently in quarantine, for a grand total of 6 positive cases in the district among staff and students, and currently 40 in quarantine. That is the highest number we've seen in quite a while. I think I've talked more with Rachel this week than I have any time before this week. Not that I don't like talking with Rachel. So with the actions that you took last month regarding how we cover classrooms, between substitutes and staff covering for each other, we have been able to cover our absences so far. I will say we are threadbare, and it wouldn't take much more for us to be to the point where we just don't have the staff to cover anymore, and we would have to start sending people home. And honestly, I mean, I'm not sure how many people went home just today, but it could be like, okay, today's the day. We don't have the people, because it's always just an exposure, a phone call away. So we worry about that. So based on what we know from the county, what we know about the communities surrounding us, the advice that we're getting from medical professionals and the epidemiologists, and what we're seeing in our own rates in our own schools, and the number of exposures and positive cases that we're learning about just this week, we are recommending that we consider moving to an all-distance learning model for middle and high school students beginning November 23rd. Now, if the numbers decrease, if this falls off, we can stop this. But we want to make this recommendation far enough in advance that people know about it, that our staff can plan for it, that our families can plan for it. And so I would rather make the recommendation and be able to back off if the numbers drop, than to announce this as a surprise the day before it happens. We would hope to return to a hybrid model by January 4th. This would be dependent on the health of the community, and we would need to come back together. Of course, we're going to continue to monitor those numbers, talk with MDH and the counties on a regular basis to monitor that. For some reason, we were able to come back before that because COVID disappears for Christmas. That would be amazing. But going into it, we would be looking at January 4th. Transitioning the elementary schools would also need to be considered as we watch those numbers. If we get to the point that we're above 50, then we need to start considering our elementaries going to distance learning as well. I would recommend that when we come together for the November 16th board meeting, that we look at these numbers again and decide on elementary at that time. So we're a little bit farther down the road. But I do want to give people a heads up that that's a possibility so that they can prepare for it, be thinking about what are my kids going to do? Of course, Saints Overtime, Tammy's here. Saints Overtime would be in place if that were happening, and we're working through all the details of that as well. So tonight you have a few options as a school board, and I'm sure we'll have lots of conversation before we get to this point, but I want to let you know that you could make a motion tonight that we would plan on having our middle and high school in distance learning starting on November 23rd, with the understanding that we're coming back together on the 16th to revisit those numbers. And if they've dropped, we can change our mind. Or if they've increased, we can add elementary to that. Or you can make no motion tonight and just wait until the 16th. In my mind, the benefit of making the motion is that people understand, okay, this is a real possibility and it's coming, but they will likely know that anyway.
This is Vicky. I'm just wondering, with the recommendations that you're making now, do you think that there might be changes coming up with your meeting you're having with the governor on Friday?
I don't believe so. I think that has more to do with the details of the services that we're providing.
Okay.
They've kind of given us a hint ahead of time, and that isn't what, although there was much speculation, and I think that's why they came out with an embargoed list of things that they'll be discussing.
Okay.
This is Tracy, Stewie. So I have a question too. So if we're looking at this distance learning for the middle school and high school, will there be consideration given for kids that just they just struggle with the distance learning and they aren't succeeding? And we know that because we saw them sit from March to May and we just can't have you don't want to, I mean, all kids are important, but there's some kids that can do it and there's some kids that can't. And whether it be academically or because of a disability or whatever it is there a way to still bring those kids in? Because my understanding was they did add something to the Safe Learning Plan to allow for that, and if that's been considered.
Thank you so much for asking that. Yes, that is a huge difference from the guidance that we had last spring, where we were told nobody comes in. That guidance was changed to say that an IEP team could come together, or a support team could come together and make the decision that a student would highly benefit from some in-person services, and we could arrange for that even while we are in distance learning. So that would be students who receive special education could qualify. It doesn't mean that if a student has an IEP, they would automatically need that service, but if it was decided that they couldn't be successful without that, we would provide that, or English language learners, or students with a 504, or students who are receiving intense interventions to catch up. There are a number of reasons that we could decide that a student would need in person, and we have developed some rubrics, and we're working on fine-tuning those for us to work through to decide which students that would be and what those models would look like. It would really be individualized based on the student's needs.
Okay, so this is an opportunity for parents too, to just be honest with what you can and can't do. I mean, the school doesn't know what they don't know. And so not every kid that has an IEP, like you said, needs that. But there's some kids that maybe don't have an IEP that do too. So, I mean, just to speak up and get help if you need it, because we can't have kids just coast for 18 months or however long it's going to take.
Superintendent Gronseth?
Yes.
This is Bill Soderlund. Just to go further with what Tracy was asking, if they don't have an IEP or a 504 English language learner, if they're just a general population student that we're losing because they're not keeping up, are there do you have a rubrics to address that for those students?
I'm predicting that's one of the areas that we may get more guidance on in the next couple of days. But it is my understanding that if a student is receiving some kind of intervention, so they don't necessarily have a documented disability, but they need that intervention to be successful, that we could bring them into. So they wouldn't necessarily need an IEP or a 504.
Good, because, you know, there are going to be students, and I assume we have several examples that they're not, they're just general population students that are going to have some trouble here. So it would be nice to have a plan in place where you could bring them in, even if it's for a day a week, just to get them caught up to speed here somewhere. So I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and sometimes that support could be electronic too. That would work for some students to have a little more synchronous time with a staff member. It really will kind of depend on the skills of the students and the access they have to help at home too.
Superintendent Gronseth, how's the substitute? We raised the pay for substitutes. Has that had an impact yet? And would you please advertise it as long as we're in a meeting, public meeting?
Absolutely. There are posters that have been posted throughout the area and at Mankato and some of the campuses. And if you're grabbing a coffee or a cookie or doing some grocery shopping locally, keep an eye out to see our posters around. We have had a few more paraprofessionals to interview, and as I understand it, today someone called that they had seen it and heard about it, and it was actually a licensed teacher who lives in the area, and said, "Sign me up. Let's do some subbing." So I think it is helping.
Could you go over the rates, what it is, what the pay is?
Sure. Thank you. Yes, we increased the substitute rate to $175 a day. And, you know, it's really a great opportunity for people who want to try on teaching, or maybe they were teaching, or perhaps they have a license in another area that they're considering, and it's an opportunity for people to come in and try that. When you sign up to be a substitute for us, you always have the choice of accepting jobs or not accepting jobs, and letting us know if you'd prefer working in a elementary setting or middle school setting or high school setting, or I want science or English or kindergarten. Kindergarten's good. And so it really offers some flexibility. And so does our paraprofessional substitutes make $12.65 an hour. And they too work in a variety of jobs throughout the district and at all levels. So that's an opportunity if you enjoy working with students, especially working one-to-one with students or with small groups, you might want to try that. And for the substitute teachers, all you need is a 4-year degree. It doesn't have to be in education. It can be in anything. And for our paraprofessionals, there are a few different ways to qualify for that. If you have an associate's degree or 2 years of post-secondary education, or if you take what's called the Para-Pro test and pass with a score of at least 460. I feel like I just did a commercial.
You did well. I have another question. How many total people do we have, students and staff combined, in the district? You know, would it be safe to say 2,300 maybe? 20?
Probably a little, yeah, right around there.
Okay, and we only have 6 positive cases, correct?
Yep.
So what percent is that? Someone that's a math teacher, maybe help me out.
I'm not a math teacher, but I have a calculator.
All right. Seems like it's less than 1%, I think.
Yeah.
That's currently, John. we've had other fluctuating levels of cases,
Right.
but at the moment, that's where we're at.
Right. Well, that's what we've got to deal with. I think the other thing that when I think scalpel, I think figuring out where are these cases originating, how are they being dealt with, and I mean, this still seems like broad strokes. We have three parts of our community that are either enclosed or somewhat enclosed. In the state hospital, assisted living, and Gustavus. And I know there's a huge spike at Gustavus. I think that's going to be reflected in the county evaluation or the county numbers. And the protocols at Gustavus are very strict. I mean, not as strict as they can be in an enclosed setting, but the number of people in quarantine up here is very big, and there's places, and a lot of people are quarantining at home. They go home for that. And so I think part of the jump started the weekend before Halloween. That was when we saw a bigger jump. And but those people have been taken out of circulation, so to speak, with quarantine. And even, I mean, there's so many in quarantine that are connected to or were around somebody. The contact tracing, I guess, is what I'm saying, is been very thorough up here. And so I think that's part of the numbers. I think using Kasota is a sliver of LeSueur County. You know, where are those cases in LeSueur County? There are people that can help us with that to kind of figure out. And Nicollet County, like you said, we're would you say a third of the population? Mm-hmm. So I mean, we can figure that stuff out too. I just think that's what I thought of when I heard scalpel. You know, is are we really getting down into where this is happening? Because you know, so that we're doing a better evaluation, a deeper dive into where these cases are originating and where are they being contained.
I think I did mention that about 40% of the cases in Nicollet County are in St. Peter.
Right, but then even further, how many are in assisted living? How many are at Gustavus? I think would be a relevant question.
Yeah, I think you're right, John. Going back to something I said earlier, though, there's 64 counties in the state that have higher rates than us. So, you know, Redwood County, to my knowledge, doesn't have a college. They may have, you know, they may have their own pockets. They may need to take a scalpel to that, but it is definitely clear that Minnesota is experiencing a lot more cases of COVID at the present than we were a few weeks ago. So I think we do want to look at those numbers. I myself would look a little bit more towards the scalpel approach if Nicollet County were an outlier and you had LeSueur and Sibley and Brown and Blue Earth half as much as us. That's not what we're seeing right now. We're all kind of in that same boat of that 40 to 60 cases per 10,000, as I understand it.
Well, just to follow up on that, Ben, though, I mean, the South Central Service, lots of districts around us have numbers that don't reflect the teaching model that they're currently in. And one of the things, South Central Service has a task force that helps you get down to the scalpel level that these districts, it's my understanding, are using to help them figure out what are we really talking about as far as safety in the community and whatnot. And so are we using the task force with South Central Service like other districts are?
Well, there are other districts in our area that have gone to distance too.
I agree, but there are people that haven't and have been in different learning models that don't reflect the numbers that are coming from the county. Does that make sense, Ben?
I mean, I acknowledge that there probably are districts that have decided as a school board to go against the MD MDH guidance. I acknowledge that. Whether it makes sense to me or not is a different story.
Well, I don't think the MDH would let you get away with it unless you could provide that deep dive, that scalpel approach as to why you think your school district is an exception. I think it's very clear that you must follow unless you can justify why you should be able to stay in a different learning model than what the numbers reflect.
When we met with the county, and Jody was in the meeting too, along with the state epidemiologist, and I did share that we were not seeing that transmittal during the school day, and I really do believe that that is because we have been in the hybrid model. We have been able to distance. Other schools have had hundreds of students in quarantine because they haven't been using that social distance. They've had more close contacts during the school day than we have, and I think that's a celebration. And they agreed that they thought we could continue, and for right now, but they are concerned that these numbers are going to continue to climb in the community and that we will begin to see more. Part of me really, I want kids to be here too, but I also want to be really mindful that I don't want to wait until it's too late either.
So are we using South Central Service Co-op to help us with this project?
And maybe Jody can speak to this. I believe Nicollet County has opted to do their own work on this and opted out of the regional model.
Kind of two different things. The case investigation, you can kind of give that to the service cooperative, and we've been doing those locally. So if we have a case in the school, Rachel and I work together on those. And to what you've been talking about, I really think the school district has done a great job of keeping those desks 6 feet apart, keeping those kids apart. The hybrid model has worked very well, because when we go in and we look at these cases, and the masking too, when we go in and we look at these cases, it's like, yeah, they were in school on Tuesday, and at this point we're at, Thursday, and they've only been in school one day during the week. That makes it a whole lot easier, and people can remember what happened. So we will look at that, and then, like, I'll have Rachel go through and talk to the different teachers. I'll interview the people involved. And we are really not having to take a lot of people out because the staff is really doing a good job. I would completely commend them on that. I think there's a couple different, so let's go back to, so the regional support team is kind of more, so if we get a case in the school, after Rachel and I get done deciding what to do about it, I will email them, let them know about the case, because they get notified of the case by Rachel. So then just to follow up, I notify them of the case again and what the disposition was, how many people, what we found, how many people we had to put out, basically. So if we need more from them, we can get more from them. But since we've kind of got it set up that way, they haven't been intervening as much. But I can tell you, with the numbers increasing in Nicollet County, they have been intervening more. We have been meeting with the school districts in Nicollet County to let them know of these the numbers increasing. Because when tomorrow's numbers come out, I think you'll see it's probably going to be about 27. So, because, keep in mind, it's 2 weeks behind. So we know what happens those 2 weeks coming up. So that was kind of why we went to the admin team last week to say, okay, we know that it's coming up and it's going to be 38. We've never been in the 30s before. And, as a parent, I don't want to know about a change like that, like on Thursday, and then we change on Monday. You want to have plenty of time for daycare, scheduling, work, that type of thing, and even the kids to make that adjustment. So that's why we kind of, sounded the warning bells that this is what's coming up. It's very feasible to stay where you are, but I think this is a good reminder, a good warning that we need to start thinking about what comes next. Now, on the horizon, what I can tell you is that because our numbers are climbing in Nicollet County, we have approached the state to conduct community testing in Nicollet County. We have been approved to do that. We will do that in conjunction with Gustavus and some other organizations in Nicollet County. But right now our plan is to have a testing site in St. Peter, one at Gustavus, and go out into the county like Cortland, Nicollet, Lafayette to do some individual testing there. Really try to reach some of the underserved populations. That, John, that's where you can use the scalpel sometimes, is because our case rate will go up because of the testing. When you test, you find more cases, but it's very valuable to stop the spread of it. So that's a good place to use your scalpel when you say, okay, well, the cases went up in Nicollet County, but they just tested 500 people, and here's why. But we do know, so we know our numbers are going up. We know we're doing a community testing event, and we know it's Halloween, the holidays are coming. We also know that the Gustavus students are, presumably going home around Thanksgiving too. So those numbers won't be as much of a factor. But one of my concerns too is between Thanksgiving and New Year's, we already know people are in COVID fatigue. Right? They're kind of doing a little bit what they want, regardless of what we say. We wouldn't advise it. Social gatherings aren't advised for the holidays, but people, that's the tradition we have. They're going to go back and forth. So if the kids are doing that, if their families are doing that, do you want them coming back into school? It's just, I don't know what the answer is. And I think that's something we have to think about, what happens between that time where we become a very social society during that month or so.
Great answer, Jody. I really appreciate it. I think our community is unique in that we do, like I mentioned, we have the state hospital, the college, and assisted living, and that might be a scalpel type approach in that I can't make my neighbor, quarantine if he's supposed to quarantine, but in those three situations, they have to. There are consequences if they don't. And so that's why I think, me personally, I'd like to wait and see what the numbers look like and where they're coming from. If we can get more data on where these cases are coming from, and rather than lumping us all together, I think that would be, I'd be more comfortable changing learning models.
John, go ahead, Jody.
Time, John, though, could we start thinking about how would we move to that model? I'm not saying we have to move to it, but could we start thinking about what is the plan for doing that? I would feel more comfortable if we were thinking about, maybe we don't need to go that way, but what is the plan for when we do? Because unfortunately, our numbers are continuing to grow. I don't think they're going to come down. Some of those scalpel areas we might be able to drop off, like, the college students. But then there's also a lot of talk that the college students will be coming back after Thanksgiving. So, you could kind of, okay, well, those are the Gustavus students and they're mostly on campus. They intersect with us here. You could do that. But I think long range, our numbers are going to keep going up.
But just to follow up on that, Jody, I don't think many students are coming back because everything is online at that point, starting at Thanksgiving. And they just today decided that none of the athletic teams are going to be allowed to practice during that time to further keep students away from campus. So that's a positive.
So you're saying that Gustavus is making the choice to do distance learning?
They decided that in September. Yep.
Okay.
That was just the plan. That wasn't anything new related to these developments, but that was the plan, that the students kind of staggered coming in. They took the first years, the transfer students, people that were new to campus, and the athletes. They started off. The upperclassmen and the others joined about a month into it. And then the plan has always been, because of the flu season, to wrap it up by Thanksgiving, and then the students will go to online learning for a couple of weeks before the semester ends.
Ben, so to your point about pointing out that Gustavus is going to distance learning, I think it's a smart choice just because they are going back to their own communities. And now we could be bringing something from St. Paul to St. Peter. Okay, that's the purpose of it. Not that they think that the numbers are going up and that there's a greater threat to have the students actually here.
Sure. Yeah, and I appreciate their willingness to and their forethought in doing that. You know, I think we're talking about kids and we're talking about transmission. You know, as Superintendent Gronseth mentioned earlier, we are seeing transmission at some school activities. So the school is not completely without transmissions. It's just we have been able to exclude the learning day as part of that. But you know, the other thing I would say again, our neighboring counties are high, and the number I'm looking at right now probably differs a little bit from what Jody has, so apologies for that, but Blue Earth's at 41.8. How many of us go shopping in Mankato? And we can try and be safe. How many of our staff live in Mankato or North Mankato or LeSueur or Kasota? You know, it's not just the kids. It's our staff as well that we have to account for and keep safe. So I think that, you know, I feel like the numbers are going up, and you know, we don't want to get to a point where we have to do it tomorrow because we've got, you know, 20 teachers quarantined or things like that.
This is Tracy Stewie. I'm kind of more leaning to what John is saying too, in that I feel like we should wait only because when the numbers were down, we didn't feel the need to kind of plan ahead for us to possibly go to a less restrictive. So if, you know what I mean? So it's like, why are we now also the numbers are up and we're going to go? I'm not saying we shouldn't to tell people that, hey, you know, stuff is getting real and you should consider it. But I kind of feel like just putting the brakes on it, because I would like to see exactly on those numbers, like John said too, where are they, how many people of those are in the nursing home, how in Benedictine, in Oak Terrace or wherever, in Gustavus, and then let's see where we're at. Because really the fact that we've only had 6 close contacts at school, I think is amazing. And that says a lot about our staff and the diligence they have. So if we're sending all those kids home all the time, do we really think they're going to sit in their houses? You know what I mean? So are we really helping the community by telling them all to stay home? Because now they're all just going to go to the mall and eat. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I just feel like we should just wait and see where we're at. And people have to know that it's getting there. But the middle school and high schooler kids are already talking about it. It's like a snow day. You know what I mean? So it's not like it's going to be a surprise. That's my opinion.
And this is Bill, if I may please. You know, Tracy made a really good point. If we're looking at this from a public health standpoint, we're taking children and we're saying, okay, you're staying at home, distance learning, they are going to be interacting with each other. I mean, that's reality. And so are we actually accomplishing what we want to accomplish? You know, and if we're looking at the school as a spreader, a super spreader, however you want to call it, you know, is that what we're trying to help the community here? What are we actually trying to accomplish? Because we are trying to help the community. I agree with Tracy on most of the time, you let those kids stay at home, they're going to go out and hang out with their friends, and they will not be wearing masks and they won't be social distancing. So I'd like just a response to that thought process.
Well, Bill, I would like to hear what Jody has to say again, and she can reiterate it because she is a public health expert. And I would just say that, you know, if you believe that's happening now, and then those kids are coming back into school and interacting with staff and other kids in a different way than maybe they are off campus. And then you have sports and activities as well. But continuing to do a hybrid model will not prevent students from interacting outside of school either. So, but Jody, you heard this. If you want to maybe try and answer that or talk some more about what you recommend.
I mean, I definitely see where you're saying where you want to see the numbers and make sure that that's the reality and see how that impacts you know, the school itself, that the school is really kind of a safer place right now. I see that. That's what I hear you guys saying, and that makes sense. But I do see our numbers going up, and I do see it when kids are off. I do see them Like we've had kids go sledding together and we've had to quarantine them. We've had kids playing football together. We've had to quarantine outside of school. So, but I think this is all good. I mean, we may not come up with the answer tonight, but I think it's really good that we're having these discussions and really looking at all those different ways. Because I mean, I can appreciate scalpeling and, you know, the numbers might look different when there's not Gustavus students on the campus or when, you know, one of the outbreaks subsides right now. I can appreciate that, but you know, that part, I think this discussion is good, even though I know some people, if you don't come up with a straight answer that, you know, like this is it to date, some people will be frustrated, but I think this has been good discussion and, you know, very valuable for that. The only concern I would have would just be to really think about what the plan is for moving in a more restrictive way, and not that we have to just to come up with the plan so that we know what it is. Because like I go to these Kano meetings and we talk about this and I keep saying, well, our numbers are going up. So I really, because we always say, well, we're not going to decide on a Thursday and then change it on Monday. So kind of start thinking about how much notice would we want to give? How would this work? What kind of notice would we give? Who would be affected? You know, those kinds of questions. I can definitely see all the arguments that are made. You know, to me, it's still, you know, the numbers are going up and the holidays are coming and people are going to be out and about more. And I think that's going to be riskier, you know, if you get to overarching, but all those things that you guys mentioned are factors and should be considered.
Thank you.
Jody, I think you did a great job of explaining this and having this conversation. So I think there's a couple of questions. Is number one, this is the trend. What are we planning to do? And
Right.
Tracy mentioned we were not opening up when our numbers allowed us to, because we didn't want to be jerking people around. And if our numbers go up a little bit above, you know, it needs to work both directions. So I thought that was a really well said. I think we need to know what kind of timeline do people need in the community.
Mm-hmm.
We need to notify them that this is happening, and we're going to try to give you 7 day or 2 weeks or a week's notice. And I think we need to have that plan right now or sooner rather than later. But I think to make a decision today and then that we're closing on the 23rd and we're going to stay closed essentially until after Christmas, we're going to be distance learning. I'm really concerned about making that decision tonight. So I think we need to know what would be appropriate to notify parents that we will be closing. So we decide, God forbid, but next week we say we got to close. We're going to close the following week. How much time do they need? And then I think surgical, we need to keep thinking surgical and err on the side of caution. I always want to err on the side of caution, but I think today to say we're going to shut down till after the first of the year, you know, from before Thanksgiving till after New Year's, I think that might be a little excessive. That sounds like a blunt force object, not a surgical scalpel.
Thank you, Bill. I do want to hear from Drew because he had some questions, and Tim as well, and Vicki.
Yeah. This is Drew Dixon. Jody, thank you for being here with us tonight. It's been great.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I'm comfortable with the recommendation. I think it's a good recommendation, and I think we should take action. And I've got, you know, I'll explain how I see it. It's clear to me that the states surrounding Minnesota, their cases have been on the steady incline for a while. Nicollet County's been kind of holding out, and this south central Minnesota has been holding out. If we look at East Grand Forks, Fargo, St. Cloud, those communities their numbers are over 100. It doesn't seem to me that we could expect us to maintain a 30s or 40s over the next few months when that's not what we're seeing from the districts and the counties surrounding us or fairly close to us. So we have our county health workers and experts saying, hey, okay, we're knocking on your door now because you need to know that this is happening and this is coming, and this is a substantial jump. I believe that to be true. So we have that scenario cooking. We're all worried about having enough personnel to keep buildings open. I mean, it would be awful if all of a sudden South had a few teachers out and we can't do it anymore. We have to, close the building or close 2 buildings, or we just don't. We really can't be in that situation. And I think, even if we made a plan saying, all right, families, next week we're going to close, I still think that's too quick. I think we need to plant that seed now. The natural timing of this works well. I know that other districts are looking to do very, very similar things. See if we can make it out to that Thanksgiving time, and then we're going to go distance, if we can even make it that long. So I think it makes a lot of sense to make this decision now, just to give our community time to think about it, make plans, and wrap our heads around it.
Thanks, Drew. Tim?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of leaning with John on this one. I totally understand the numbers, and I'm not discounting numbers, and I'm not discounting data. I mean, that drives pretty much our world right now is data. But I'm, I think that we've been doing hybrid learning since the beginning and have been one, super spreader away from shutting down all the buildings, because we're, as Superintendent Gronseth said, we're threadbare right now on staffing. And we constantly are rotating staffing through, and we're trying to get extra, substitutes. And I guess from my point, as I'm thinking about it, I don't know what the difference is now, other than, yep, our cases are going up. But to John's point and to Tracy's point, they're not necessarily going up in our school. They are going up in the county, and they've been going up around in the area. And so I think what I'm hearing from John is scalpel and see where we're at with the school end of things. I appreciate the numbers. I totally get it. I've had family members with COVID. I know it's serious. I know that it is a bad thing. However, if we can, in my opinion, I think the hybrid is a better teaching model, and I'm not a teacher. As long as our kids are seeing a teacher, it's better than distance learning. I might be wrong. I'm just a farm kid outside of town that, works at the state hospital. So I just think as long as we can hold the better. I personally, in my opinion, I'm not ready to make the decision in 2 weeks. Absolutely. I think this discussion is really good. I think we need to be out there telling people the numbers are going up. This is where we're headed. It's not looking good for continuing our model if things don't turn around, or all of that. That's my opinion. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Vicki?
Yes, thank you. This is Vicki. I'm really having a tough time with this one. I'm leaning both ways. The thing that really, I understand, you know, that if the kids are home, I really want to see the kids in school. I really want to see that. But coming from a social worker perspective is preventative. I mean, usually you want to do the preventative thing. And I'm thinking, okay, so it's going to be what, maybe 4 weeks that they would be gone. As long as I know that they're going to be returning. And this is, you know, the holidays coming, and maybe it would give everybody a chance to kind of, you know, get back to, well, not everybody's going to be healthy again, but it would give them some time. If you have these kids getting, they have to quarantine for 14 days, that's almost the time that they're going to be gone doing homeschooling. So I mean, I really do want to see the kids in school, but I really think we need to do some preventative too. And I worry about the parents out there because they do need the extra time to prepare. I mean, if that's what we're going to do, and I'm open to discussing it later, but yeah, I'm really torn.
Thank you, Vicki. I'd just like to add that today is November 4th. We have a meeting on the 16th. The 23rd is really, at this point, 2 weeks away because tomorrow's Thursday. That's our last in-person day there is distance learning on Friday. But for the sake of argument, we're 2 weeks away from the 23rd already. So I totally understand that we can't predict where the numbers are going to be exactly 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now. I think what Superintendent Gronseth was saying, and certainly speak for yourself, but that we could set some parameters and let parents know tonight, here is what we're thinking based on this information. Obviously, if the numbers go back down to 28, we could change our mind. But if the numbers stay at 40 or above, the Department of Health guidance says at 30, we would go to distance learning for 5 through 12. So, in talking about a scalpel, we're not at 30 or 31, we're at 40 to 50. So it's a little bit higher. But we could at least let parents know this is what we are thinking. This is what we will do if these numbers stay where they're at, go up. If they don't or they're lower, we won't do this. But that'll give parents a couple of weeks to figure out. These are older kids, but there may be some childcare needs. There may be things like that that they need to figure out. It would allow our teachers to figure this out. It would allow our activities to know when their endpoint is, rather than if we go to distance tomorrow, those football games aren't happening, the play isn't happening. But if we're able to say, hey, set this date, if you could move things around or you can do things a little differently, we can still make these things work. It's a nice transition before winter sports start. So I think that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about a finite decision that we can't revisit on the 16th. We're talking about setting some expectations and parameters.
If I could,
please.
So if it's been, I can't remember when we had that meeting with the regional team. Was that last week?
I think so, yeah.
So, one of the things that I'm charged with as superintendent is to follow the guidance of the state and also to take care of our staff and our students. And, that it's a challenging role for educational administrators without COVID, right? To make sure our kids are educated and that everyone is safe and healthy and having a good experience. And then you add this layer of COVID on top of it. And when we were given the recommendation by the regional team that we consider this, that we dig into our data, and that their recommendation was that K-12 would be distance learning between Thanksgiving and the holidays. And I can't tell you how much I've been staring at my ceiling lately at night, having all of these same thoughts and these same conversations that are playing out tonight. I want our kids to come to school. I would love for them to stay in hybrid. I also don't want to get. I also don't want to make a call that causes someone to lose their life or to get really sick or to, that weighs heavily on me as well. And so with the guidance, I came to, are we proactive or reactive? Reactive means we wait until we have all these cases and we have people who are getting sick or that our numbers are so big that we can't operate, or we're proactive and we act a little bit early. And maybe it's the wrong call, but I would much rather make the wrong call and have people be safe than wait to make the call and possibly not have people safe. But the 23rd is what the recommendation says. We could also look at the 30th, which makes it, we go right up to Thanksgiving Day. And then we're talking about really 3.5 weeks of school in between. And then you have the holiday break on there that brings you through the January piece. So that's just a bit about the admin team's own struggle with this and wanting to have kids here and going back and forth between reactive and proactive. And yeah, I don't know if the admin team has things that they want to add.
I don't know if it's helpful at all, but I put it in the chat room that as you're pondering your decision, in that time between when kids would be coming back from holidays, there are actually 9 in-person days at the most per kid. If that's helpful in any way.
Ben, I think the community should be on notice from the vigorous discussion that we had tonight. I think that this is definitely being considered seriously. I need to see a little more scalpel-like numbers personally. I'm 1/7 of the board, but I think it would be smart in our weekly Sunday night thing to make sure the community knows that we are seriously considering this, and that administrators should have a plan in place in case we need to move to distance learning. But and I think no matter how you feel about masking, I think when you're in a public place or when you're within 6 feet where you just be socially distant, but this is the time to mask. I mean, this is the chance for the community to really take steps here to do something that can keep our kids in front of teachers. And as we were talking, I mean, as Jody mentioned, and I mean, what we found is one of the safest places for these kids is to be in school. We're doing a great job of social distancing and masking, and I think that point wasn't lost on me. I think that's something that had the numbers come back differently. I mean, we're way less than 1% have come from our student or staff population. So I just wanted to get that out there, that please, community, be on notice that this is something that we are seriously considering. And if the data comes back in a certain way, I'm all for it. Okay, but I just need more of a scalpel approach.
Thanks, John. I think one thing that might be helpful for the public is a date that we are considering doing this. If it's the 23rd or the 30th, certainly if 30 teachers are out tomorrow, we're not going to be able to conduct in-person school. But what date are we shooting for? So if we could talk a little bit about that, and after that, I'm really interested in what factors would make you as a board member, each of you, say, yes, we need to do this. I assume, well, I don't want to assume anything, but one of those factors for me is if the MDH says, hey, you should go to distance, I'm going to listen to MDH. If Jody says, hey, you absolutely need to go to distance, I'm going to listen to Nicollet County Public Health. If we have X number of teachers out, and I'm not the one to make that decision, but at what point do we say we are going to distance? And is that we're going to distance for that building because we don't have enough teachers? Or are we just saying, nope, this is one of those factors? If the numbers stay above what for how long? So if the numbers stay above 42 for 4 weeks, does that mean yes? If the numbers stay above 35 for 2 weeks, some sort of criteria. Otherwise, I think it'll be hard for the public and hard for Superintendent Gronseth and the administrators to gauge where we're at in that process.
Sure, Leonard. I do want to address. I'm trying to monitor some of the emails that come in while we're doing this at the same time, and there are some people who are asking about that scale, about that 10 to 20 and 20 to 30 and 30 to 50, and are understanding that to be a cut and dried. If it's this number, you're in this. And, that was really a tool that the state was using in the beginning. And now they're finding, and that's this talk about this scalpel approach, is really looking at your data. What specifically in your community, how's it being spread? How many cases, how many are in the school? How many are in quarantine? So it's not that, once you hit 30, you're automatically in distance learning, but really looking at the whole situation. Jody, I noticed you came off mute. Did you want to speak to that?
Oh, I don't think I've been on mute, but I would actually, because, the way I calculated, tomorrow will show up as a 27 case rate. So well within what we're doing now. But, then the next week on the 12th, it'll be 38. And then on the 19th. So if parents have missed this discussion that we're having today, by the 19th, when it hits 48, and the recommendation is, elementary hybrid, middle school, high school, distance, just nipping at the both distance learning at 50 or more, I think people are going to pay a lot more attention then, and they're going to, be more at the approach. I think we want to come out and say, we've been monitoring this. We are actively doing this, and this has been a process this whole time, versus, in 2 weeks when they look at it and say, well, is my kid safe at school? It's this number and you haven't done anything. So I think we're moving along the right direction, but I think that is a factor too, that people are going to stand up and take a lot more notice of it by November 19th.
If I may,
Nope.
right now we're scheduled to have a meeting in a couple of weeks or 10 days. I think under the circumstances, it might be beneficial to have a meeting every week and keep monitoring this.
Well, believe me, we're doing this every day, but we could certainly give you further updates.
But you're asking us to vote on something, and one of the arguments about the night to vote for this is that our next meeting is going to be so far in the future that it has little effect or little benefit. If you're asking us to vote on this, to me, I would like to, okay, we've got this information, put the public on notice, and possibly have another meeting next week and say, okay, this is what the numbers look like. We could, maybe we have a meeting next week and the numbers went down. I don't know. I don't think they will, but I think that's what we need to do instead of just delaying our meetings. Let's have our meetings work around what's going on right now.
Thank you, Dr. Slolerland. To follow up on that, I guess what I'm grappling with is at what point do we listen to the numbers? And I don't mean to sound cranky when I say that, but we all can look up the numbers. We're all given the numbers via email. I'll have a meeting if that will be a productive conversation, but I don't understand at this point what we're discussing. Are we discussing the fact that it's been at 45 for 3 weeks, or are we discussing where those cases are, if they're in the college or if they're in the nursing home or somewhere else? I don't know what criteria we are asking our administrators to watch and to parse so that we can make a decision. I guess that's what I'm grappling with now as a board member.
Well, this is Tracy. So this is what I would like to see. I would like to see the little chart that we have that's the number of confirmed cases, and then it has early childhood through grade 4 staff, and then the positive quarantine close contacts. Can we see that? Like, what's the trend line on that? I mean, so are these all these, like these close contacts, when did they happen? Did they happen in September or did they happen now? Like, I want to see the trend line on that, because we're supposed to be taking into consideration how it is passing and how it affects our school community. So we need to see where we're at. We need to know how many teachers are out all the time, obviously, because we can't teach without the teachers. And I need to see, we have this 48 number that's coming out next week. Well, I know there's a bunch of people at Benedictine that have it. So how impacted is that to that number? And so we can't just look at the number and say, we got to know where that number is coming from. So I have to know when I'm looking at a number, I have to see this is Oak Terrace and this is Benedictine and this is North Mankato. Because, I mean, so are the elementary schools in North Mankato are they being told? I mean, I'm just struggling with the number is just this broad number, and we're supposed to do a scalpel approach, and we say we are, but then we go back and talk about the big number. So those are the things that I need.
Okay, that's fair. Our neighboring districts are absolutely talking about this. Some have already made decisions. Others will make decisions. And again, they're doing the same thing with their numbers, and Nicollet County numbers are not out of line, and in fact are more optimistic than many other counties in Minnesota right now.
And
Ben?
I can answer you that the numbers on that chart for the positive cases in quarantine, those are current. So those are cases that we have right now, and people are on quarantine right now. So we have 6 cases right now, and we have 40 on quarantine. The close contacts have all happened within the last 2 weeks.
And Tim,
But
I want to.
I just one
Tracy.
question. So out of those close contacts, has anybody gotten COVID from those close contacts? Yes, not shaking her head, yes. So there was a school spread then. Somebody had it at school, was exposed to somebody at school, and this person got it. That's my
Please answer
question.
that question.
No, sorry. I guess I didn't understand your question. There was close contact recently.
Close
at
contact,
school.
but I'm talking about school spread.
Just close
So
contact.
we aren't a super spreader at this point because we haven't spread it at school, correct?
Right.
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to be sure.
Yeah.
Tim, I
Okay.
do want to get to your comment, Superintendent Gronseth.
I was just going to say, we don't know because those are our first contacts and they're still in quarantine.
And yeah, and to follow up on that, Tim, sorry, Jody, if you could just say the thing that I feel like my understanding of this is in planning, it makes you feel like you can be proactive. The reality is that we're looking at all of these cases in the rearview mirror. And so it's very difficult to be proactive about like, oh, we have a couple of teachers who are in need of being on quarantine, and so that we can make it's the cow has left the barn at that moment. Like, so I do fear that, we're at a little bit at a mercy of the community numbers, and that makes sense because our kids and staff are out in the community and they're with their families, and we probably won't get to have a gradual, these cases will just happen. And if I was with a lot of people, or I participated in a sporting event, or I was at a wedding, that's just going to create more cases. We have a lot of teachers in the district with kids who are also in the district. I would say that that's drastically different from when I started on the board, when most of our teachers were in the second half of their careers and their kids were older. That's not the case now. And so it's not necessarily a 1-for-1, it's a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1, because we have parents who are teachers, and sometimes it's one parent is a teacher, sometimes it's two parents as a teacher. You might take out 2 kids and 2 teachers, or 3 kids and 2 teachers in one instance. So it gets messy pretty quick. And Tim, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take your time.
No, I agree with both you and Tracy. It does get messy real quick, and that means we could go distance 2 days from now, based on the fact that we've got a bunch of teachers go out. I think what I'm hearing and what I'm cautious about is the fact that I don't know. I want everybody to be safe. There's no doubt about that. That's, I think, number one goal in everybody's mind. But it's a balancing act. We want everybody safe, but we want the kids in school. And right now, if the kids in school we're not having this explosion there, I think we keep them in there as long as we can. I'm fine with, you know what, we put the community on notice and say November 23rd, November 30th, Christmas vacation, whatever day we pick or whatever time it is, I think the discussion that we've had here this evening certainly should let people know that we're serious and things are moving in the direction that we're going to go hybrid. You better start making plans. Better call grandma and grandpa. Better call, whoever, because this is where we're headed. I don't think any of us are saying that it's not. I don't think that I'm going to vote tonight to say this is the day we're going to do it. But I certainly can in 10 days or 3 days or 4 days say, yep, look, we've got 10 teachers that are positive, or whoever. I think that's where we're on the line. Everybody's on the line, and so I'm with Tracy that, yep, the numbers are going up, but where are those numbers coming from? Is it all North Mankato? Is it all of Cortland? I'm not picking on Cortland by any means. If anybody's watching from Cortland,
Such a nice town over there. Stop it.
It's what's happening. It's what's happening in our schools. So, yeah, I could pick on Nicollet, Tracy. Anyway, that's my opinion, and so I would like to say, and I will say to everybody that I see, this is where it's headed, and let's just be cautious and know that that's where it's headed unless things turn around. Sorry.
Thank you.
Drew? Mine real quick. Oh, Drew, go ahead. I was just going to say, I agree with Tracy and her numbers. You want to set parameters, and yet we don't have specific enough numbers. We're talking about macro numbers, and I'd like to know where this is happening.
I was going to say, I think it's in everyone's best interest to, if we are going to make an adjustment to the our learning model to do that before we have an event. I think our canary in the coal mine is that large number that the county is giving us. And when that reaches a threshold, or we see recurrent numbers at that threshold, oh, okay, that's our trigger to now make adjustments so we can slow the spread of this virus. And I also don't know if I'm on board with all the scalpel stuff, because we heard today that most of the spread is community spread. We're not out heat-seeking places that might be super spreading these things and staying away from them or managing them in that way. We're looking at people who move around and flow from town to town and community to community, passing this stuff around. So I just don't. I don't necessarily see a whole lot of value in saying, hey, we need to know how many is in this building and is in this building and this institution over here, because it's all our community. It's here. We're amongst them. That. And so, and we might not be comfortable making a decision today, but I think we should make a decision very soon, because the families of this district will appreciate it, and they should deserve it. And we're trying to be smart about it. We're trying to be as proactive as possible and as appropriate as possible, with the best guidance available. So thanks.
So I just want to jump in one more time, and I know we've been leaning on Jody tonight. I know that she keeps getting put on the spot mainly by me, but I have reached out to the county, and we have worked with the state epidemiologist and others, and the graphs that I shared with you tonight were from those conversations about digging into that data. And there's only so much detail that they can provide me with. They did give us the breakdown by age, which we don't typically see, but they provided that for us, and so we can see that it's all ages from 11 to 80, and we know that if more than likely, if they're in congregate living, if they're in assisted living or the nursing care, they're probably on the far right of that chart. And most everyone else is in between. And we see that it's pretty evenly spread. And as Jody said, usually the spikes have been in that 20 to 30-year-old column. And so that's not our assisted living either. It could be our colleges.
It could be our workers at the assisted living facilities.
Yeah. And then we have the exposure types, as Drew was saying too, so we know the age of people, we know kind of where it's happening. Jody, I don't know that I'm going to be able to get any finer detail as far as 40% of the cases are in St. Peter, they're this age, they got it this way.
I can check and see how much more we can break it down for you. Part of the concern in giving that kind of information is just that it can identify cases. If we say it's in long-term care, there's only so many long-term care facilities in Nicola County, that type of thing. But we can probably break it down a little further. And to Ben's point, he talks about being proactive and reactive, and I can really appreciate that viewpoint. I think we have these numbers and we know where it's going. It's one of those rare times where this is our look into the future, because these numbers we know what the number is now, but this number isn't really going to become public for 2 weeks. So that's a chance to be proactive. And then the things that we can't control is where we're going to end up being reactive. If a whole bunch of teachers, do something and they all have to be put on quarantine, then we're going to be reactive. So I see it as, we can plan both ways for that.
Ben, I will say that if we didn't have the option for distance learning, I would feel great urgency to do something tonight, but anybody can opt for distance learning currently. If someone's not comfortable with us not making a decision tonight, they could say, I'm pulling my kid. I want them to do distance learning. I'm just saying I'd like to see more specific numbers and before I'm willing to take a vote on this.
Yeah, I do appreciate that parents, like always, have choices. They can go distance. They can ask us for more in-person time. We're looking at customizable models for individual students and what their families think are best. But I think at some point we are going to have to make a decision about the district operation as a whole. I see that we're not going to arrive at consensus tonight, but I also hear that people want to know what the numbers are and that the numbers are a factor in that decision for people. I'm wanting to know what MDH guidance is and county guidance, and that goes into guidelines, but it's also meetings like this and just talking through things. What will be the current number on the 16th, and we'll be able to see how long that was sustained. Is that less than it is today, or is it more, or is it the same? We'll know a lot more about neighboring districts because like I said, I think neighboring districts are making decisions and have. So what's LeSueur doing? What's Sibley East? What's Nicollet? What's Cleveland? What's Mankato? What are those districts doing, and what have their decisions been? I do think that this is something that we will need to address on the 16th, and probably will take up, the bulk of our meeting again. And if the numbers are less, then that's fantastic, and we can react accordingly. But if they're very similar, I think we are going to need to decide if we are moving towards distance learning, or we're going to continue to wait at that time through a motion. So I would recommend that be on the under action items for the 16th meeting.
I would entertain another study session meeting potentially next week. I mean, the reason I say that, I don't know how long it will take to get dicing of additional numbers. I don't know how long that process will take or what it will look like, but if it can be done within a week, then we could take action on that, possibly. I also, I'm with you, Ben. If we can articulate our questions or sticking points, we can address them and figure them out. I don't want to get to the 16th and be in the same place. People have the same questions. Not a good use.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree, and it's clear that we're not gonna bring this action before the board today. I think it's also fairly obvious that I would be willing to vote on this. So I think we all need to decide by the 16th what factors and what information is going to make us vote yes or no on the idea of moving to distance learning at some point in the near future, whether that's the 17th or the 23rd or the 30th, because that question will come up, and it'll be maybe different for each of you. But I think the sooner, and if you can discuss it tonight while we still have a little bit of time, or meeting with Superintendent Gronseth and just letting him know what those factors are, because if he doesn't know, he won't be able to provide that information at the meeting. And Jody, thank you for your willingness to work with the district on all of this stuff. And certainly we're not your only customer. You've got a lot of things happening, and so we want to be respectful of your time. Clearly, we're not being respectful of your time now because it's 9 o'clock at night and you're still working, but we appreciate that.
That's fine. It's my pleasure.
And similarly with Rachel Fitch, if there are questions that you have of our nurse on staff as well. So the sooner that we can get that out in the open for Superintendent Gronseth, the better.
This is Tracy. I have a question. It's about school closing, but specifically about activities. And I would like to clarify so we can all understand this in terms of the State High School League and its recommendations as to whether sports can continue in a distance learning model. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if the numbers are there and we are in distance learning, there cannot be sports. If, for example, we were sitting in like the 20s, but we just opted to do distant learning just because whatever, then you can do sports. Is that correct? Because I know that some people are thinking, even though we're going to be in distance learning, that somehow we're going to still be able to decide to continue with our activities. And I don't think if our numbers are high, then we can't. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
Yep.
And the confusion is in the cities. Are there counties that are just opting for a more restrictive model, or are they just outright breaking the rules? We're not rule breakers here in St. Peter, but are they rule breakers up there, or what's going on?
Where they're opting for a distance model before they need it?
I don't know. I just know there are some, Mr. Gronseth, do you know what I'm talking about? There's some schools, I think I think there's some schools that are still doing their sports, and it's making confusion amongst the people.
I believe that MDE and MDH are stepping in on those. I think that is one of the reasons that that letter that I shared at the beginning of the meeting from Deputy Commissioner Mueller laid that out in 2 different parts in the letter, that if your numbers indicate that you should be in distance learning, that you will not participate in activities.
Okay. And I like sports and I like activities.
I do too.
But the news flash got out about them doing it, but the news flash for them being told now that they can't isn't quite as flashy, so people aren't hearing that part. So I just wanted to make sure before I spouted off that I knew what I was talking about.
Well, and not to belabor this, but as we move into winter, most of our activities for winter are not outside, they're inside, and I think that probably, in my mind, adds to the risk of transmission. A little bit different than baseball or softball, or soccer and football have close contact too, but at least it's outside.
Hey, Ben, I think, speaking for me and probably others, if there's something that comes up, I mean, all we have to do is give a 72-hour notice to have one of these meetings next week, if need be, if more data comes in that maybe the data that we're trying to figure out is complete, and we can discuss it and look at it. And I would be all for you calling a meeting. I do not hesitate. Or if there's something that happens at school. And then I got a funny email. Why are we online for this? Why are we virtual for this meeting? Someone made a comment. What we're discussing and the irony of us doing this meeting virtual when all of our meetings recently have had board members present.
Go ahead.
The meeting room that we usually meet in, the governor's room, only has a capacity of 16, and we have 22 people in this meeting. We could have done some of them virtually, but I also wanted to use a presentation, which it's tough to do a combination of in-person discussion and it's different if people are just making a few comments online, but to have a discussion online is more difficult. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't know if I was the one that made the decision or supported it, but we both together felt that virtual, given the short notice, we're able to record this so that people can see it afterwards, which I don't think we would have that opportunity given the short notice in the governor's room. You know, as Drew has said before, it's a lot easier when it's a level playing field and we're all on the same format rather than back and forth. It's easier to have conversation. And the way that we have been doing board meetings with the hybrid model where we're in person and we've got some remote, I think works well for those regular board meetings. But I also, again, realize the Herculean effort that that city staff and district staff have to make in order for that to happen, and didn't want to ask Chris Overbo to spend 5 hours of his day making that meeting happen or this meeting happen. So
I appreciate that explanation. I think that it was actually a very valid point and deserved an explanation for people that were wondering why we're discussing, you know, are we going to stay in hybrid or not, and yet we're doing this virtually. But I think the explanation was good.
Thanks for bringing that question up. Well, if I look at the agenda, this is our one item. We have had a great and robust, rigorous Principal Engeldinger discussion. So much rigor. We can continue to talk for a couple of minutes, but I do want to be conscious of the time, and people might want to doom scroll the internet for a few more hours before you go to sleep. So. Any more questions or discussion?
If there's not, I'll make an motion to adjourn if we're to that agenda item yet.
Yeah, I will just again reiterate that. No, you're fine. That we have a meeting on Monday, November 16th, 2020, 6:30 p.m. We will be in the governor's room for that meeting, and I think the more we can prep Superintendent Gronseth and admin team for what information we want, the more of an opportunity they will have to provide that to us. So
I will say,
so we have
I'll motion Tracy's motion and thank everybody tonight for such a great, thoughtful discussion.
Thank you so much. We have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call, starting with Vicky. This is on the motion to adjourn, Vicky. Are you for or against adjourning?
Oh, Hager, aye.
Thank you.
Everybody's got to
Dr.
freeze it up.
Sodor.
Yeah, thank you, Jody, for helping us out and giving us all that good, valuable information. And I'll say aye.
Thank you. Tim.
Locust-Card, aye.
Tracy.
Stewie, aye. Thanks, everyone.
Drew.
Dixon, aye.
John.
Carlson, aye.
Leonard, aye. The meeting is adjourned. Jody, thank you so much. Board members, administrators, thank you all.